again and welcome to Shed Talk, my weekly magazine video series looking at the keeping, breeding and showing of cage birds, with, as always, a special focus on the exhibition style budgerigar. So what we've got for you in this particular episode, well, the main focus will be on looking at how I pair my birds up. Now, I'd say again, this is just the way I go about pairing my birds. There are lots of ways of doing it, and I'm sure there are lots of better ways than the way I do it, but I'll just talk you through how I pair up my budgerigar for the coming breeding season. So that will be the main focus of that, and indeed we've got the various spreadsheets and databases open to help with that pairing up process, but more about that in just a minute. We will, of course, have a look at the some clips from the Swindon Budgerigar Society Gold Show. So hopefully we'll get a few looks at some of the birds and some of the winners from that particular show. The other thing we will do is we will have a look at Fife from breeding to bench. And of course there will be an update on those all-important young zebras. So that's what we've got in store for you today. As always, if you do enjoy the show, don't forget to hit the like button, do comment on what you think of it, and also if you're not yet a subscriber, then do subscribe to the channel. All the subscriptions help the channel to grow and help promote the hobby to a wider audience on YouTube. So let's have a look at how I pair my birds up. So let me talk about how I personally go about pairing up, and I emphasise that this is how I personally do it. It's a way that I find is easy for me, and it focuses my mind on the birds and what I'm trying to achieve. It may not suit everybody, and I'm sure there are far better ways of doing it out there than the way I do it, but I suppose this is a starting point. If we're looking at thinking about pairing up and you're new to it, then this might be a starting point for you. But like I say, look around, see how other people do it, and find a way that suits you and suits the time that you have, and the style of bird or the birds that you've got, and so on, and numbers and so on and so forth. So how do I go about pairing up my birds? Well, a lot of the preparation for that has already been done. So the first thing, I suppose, is you may remember when we were, a few months ago now, when we were talking about the pairs that I had last year in last year's breeding team. I spoke a little bit about what I was hoping to get off of those pairs and my thoughts about what I might be able to do with the offspring in terms of breeding and bringing them back into the family line. There were two main ones of those, and the first one was around the blue family, and I was hoping that I could get something off the cobalt line, or the cobalt pairing, that I could breed back into dad, and what I was breeding off of, the cobalt's dad, so their grandfather, and what I was breeding off of the sky blue, the cobalt's dad, and what I might be able to put that in terms of pairing it up perhaps with the cobalt and some half sisters. Well, some of that sort of worked. I didn't really get enough off of the sky blue for that to help. However, the cobalt was very productive, you'll remember, so I do have some hens of the cobalt that I could pair back to the sky blue if I want to follow that process. So we will have a look at that as I'm pairing up anyway, but that will be in my mind. The other side was off of the grey line. You remember the two grey-green cockbirds. It was their first time in the nest box or in the breeding cage last breeding season. I was looking to see if I could get some half brothers and sisters off those and see what I could pair those two. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to, for a number of reasons, to get anything off of those two grey-green brothers. So I'm a little bit, so we didn't actually achieve what we wanted to in terms of going forward with that. families, so we will have to re-look at that. So that's the first thing in my mind. I'm looking to see an offspring from the cobalt, so a hen that I can put back to the sky blue, is one of the things that I will be looking for when I'm going through this. So the other thing that I would say that I personally like to do, having quite a small number of birds, I do like to try and pair up best to best. So looking at what my best birds are, and then finding the best cock bird and finding the best hen, or the best hen and finding the best cock bird initially that might suit those. Bearing in mind what I've just said about my plans for each of the family groups. Now I know a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people will go on, will look at the background of the bird, and will look at the various features that they're looking to improve and so on. But because I've got quite a small stud, it's just the way that works for me. I do look at features that I'm trying to improve, and we'll talk about that when I go through how I use some of the work that's already gone on. But my priority, I think, is to try and breed best to best. I've heard someone talk about saying, you know, that what you see visually on the bird, in most cases, is the genes that they're carrying, and so you know you're unlikely to get a really outstanding bird if you're pairing up two poor looking birds because the parents happen to be spectacular birds, because they may not be carrying those genes. I hope that makes sense. But that's not to say that you won't get a good bird off of a slightly lesser bird if it's come from good stock. But me personally, I look to pair best to best with my birds. So like I say, the first thing I think about is what my plans were with the previous breeding season. The next thing I go to is the bird assessment form, because that will tell me which of the birds are the better birds, and it will give me some idea of what I want. So I'm using this to fill my breeding team, so I use this to help me pair up. So what I will do is I will find the best bird in this shed, which currently is a hen, and I will then look to find a compatible cock bird for that particular bird, and one that will look to improve it. So I'm not doubling up on faults, is my first priority. So I will look at what the faults of the best hen has got, and make sure that the cock bird that I'm looking at, the cock bird that I think is suitable for her, doesn't have those faults. In fact, it should be a bird that is, you know, showing good features around whether hen is showing those faults. But I may also be looking to double up on good features. So if the hen has got particularly good blow, what I might do is go, actually what I want is another cock bird that has got particularly good blow, so I can fix that particular feature in that line of birds. So I hope that makes sense. So that's the thing that I will look to do. The final bit for me, or not the final bit, but the next stage for me, is I will then look at those two birds and I will pair them up using my breeding record program. So I will find the two birds there, and I will look to do on here it's, you know, it's a trial pairing of those birds, and that will then tell me how closely those two birds are related to each other, and whether they are too closely related or whether actually they're not related at all. And that may influence me on whether or not I think about, clearly if they're too close, then I'm not going to want it. If they're not related at all, then it may be that I will want to find something else that is also suitable for that particular hen, that is slightly closer to her, so that I'm keeping the gene pool slightly smaller in the offspring. Final thing I do then is I will pop both the birds into the showcase together and do a visual pairing of them, and make sure I'm not making any absolute errors, you know, that they're, suddenly I look at them and go, ah no, they're terrible, this should be a terrible pairing because this feature's missing on both birds, or they both got this particular fault that I didn't see when I was looking at them from my breeding records. So that's the process that I do when I'm going through pairing up. What we'll do is we'll follow that process through now with looking at the one of the hens. So the hen in my when I did my initial bird assessment that came out top, and that hen is a dark green, you'll remember. So what I will look to do now is follow that process through using that bird, and I'll explain how I go about it with that particular pair, and see if we can find her a decent cock bird that will improve her, or at least fix features that she's got in the stud. So the dark green hen that we were going to look at first is a member of the blue family, and bear in mind what we said previously. We said we would like to pair the offspring from the cobalt, which this one is, back into grandfather. So the first thing I did when I was looking at pairings was to go to the cockbirds and have a look at the way the scoring for the sky blue. And when I did that, one thing that I discovered was that this particular hen, when I assessed it, the biggest issue was around the spot size. It wasn't showing any real size in the spots, or that was the one area that I thought it was lacking. When I look at the how I scored the sky blue, again, that particular sky blue, one of the areas where it needs improvement is the spot size. Now it's possible, having looked through this, that that's an area that family needs to improve. So I didn't really want to waste this very, very good hen on reinforcing the smaller spot size. So what I've then done is looked back through to see which of my cockbirds has a reasonable size spot, and the one that comes highest is actually the outcross from Rick Watts. So the Rick Watts outcross, which is a opaline sky blue cinnamon, you might remember. Now that particular bird has a number of areas. One particular area is it has a fault around its tail. It never seems to grow a tail, so I will need to have a look at that. But otherwise, I think it's reasonably compatible. The other bird that came out very high in terms of cockbirds that I might want to think about is the Terry Sadler dominant pied bird. Now this didn't score very well at all in terms of spot size, so I'm umming and ahhing about that particular bird. It does have a real nice style about it, and I think there's a little bit of me that thinks the feather quality of the Terry Sadler dominant pied would complement the feather of the hen. So my intention now then is to have a look at those two birds in terms of their relationship, would be my normal process. But in this case I don't need to do that, because I know that both those two outcrosses aren't related to this bird at all. I will just double check, but I'm reasonably certain that they're not. So because of that, the next thing I would like to do is to get both those two cockbirds out and the hen and just compare them side by side and do a visual comparison. Before I do that, and we will have a look at that in a second, before I do that, the other thing that I need to bear in mind about this grey-green when I'm thinking about particularly using the outcross from Terry Sadler, is that this grey-green was one of the late bred birds. So it's still a relatively young hen, and I really don't want to put that in the breeding cage until it's over 10 months, probably until it's 12 months old. We did have I had a discussion about this at the Swindon Gold Show about putting hens in a bit early, and I know there are some people that are happy to pair up a hen at 8 months, others that, you know, won't pair until 11 months. I personally, you know, I prefer to go towards the 12-month period, but if it's in condition and looks like it wants to go down at 10 months, then I'd be happy to do that. But that does leave me with a dilemma that I want to put the Terry Sadler outcross down early, because it's, you know, it's getting on a bit, and I'm probably only going to get one season out of it, if that. So I will need to get that bird in the breeding cage before this bird is ready. It does offer me an opportunity to perhaps think about, you know, given that using the Terry Sadler outcross, if it breeds for me in the breeding cage in the first early stages of the breeding season, then maybe I could give it a short rest and put him in with another bird at the end, so, and possibly this one, but I'll need to think about that. So like I say, we'll get the two cock birds out and that hen, we'll put them in a show cage, and we'll do a direct comparison and make sure I'm not making any major errors. While I'm getting the birds out of the out to have a look at them, why don't we have a quick look at some of those wonderful birds that were at the Swindon Gold Show. So here we go then. I've got the the dark green hen out, a very young dark green hen out. You can see she's just going through her first molt. Has dropped her tail, or one of her tail feathers, but they do look like they're growing back. And we're just comparing her with the Watts cockbird. You can see that I think the size of the spots on this opaline cockbird would certainly help the hen out, I think. His blow will, I'm hoping, will, when put to the hen, will enhance her or the offspring, and overall he's got a nice size to him, so they're both, I think, the hen's young, like I say, so it's still got quite a bit of growing to do, so I'm hoping that will pass on to the offspring. We'll get some nice, if we were to pair these two together, hopefully the offspring will have some nice size, larger spots than the hen, and that will fix that blow of the cockbird into the line. And then I may have some offspring in the blue family that will have slightly better spots. Now you will notice as you're looking at these two birds that the cockbird, it does have some flecking, very slight flecking in the on the top of his head. I'm reasonably pleased to say that whenever everything I've bred from him has been clean, so I have no reason to believe that that will change. Of course, any cockbirds from this pairing would be normal split opaline, and hens are likely to be opalines, so we'll need to think about that going forward. But of course the hen is split blue, so we should get some blues and some greens off this. We're also likely to get cinnamon hens, so likely to get opaline cinnamon hens. So there we go, that's the initial thought. This is I think my preferred pairing for this hen, but we will have a look at the Terry Sadler dominant pied and see what I think. But at the moment this, I think, is going to be the cockbird that I'm likely to put this hen to. So there she is compared with the Terry Sadler dominant pied. I think this bird is bigger in size than the Watts bird, and has a much nicer style to the bird. I do like the style of this dominant pied. I've spoken to Terry and he said that although this bird doesn't have spots, black spots, he has always bred birds with spots, but you can probably see he does have one on one spot that shows, but it's not a massive spot. So my initial thought is that I'm going to still go with the Watts bird, but I will get the Terry Sadler dominant pied in the breeding cage quite early, and in fact it's the next one I'm going to look for a partner for. So yeah, it's possible that, if I get something off, later on in the year, if she breeds well with the Watts bird, that we could just give this one a try later on, particularly if he breeds in his first round or in the early stages of the breeding season. That's my initial thoughts then on these two birds. Let's see if we can find one for the dominant pied now, an early bird, so it'll have to be an older hen, either one of the early bred hens or one of last year's hens. There we go, that's those looked at. Still going to go with the Watts bird. Well, that's how I go about pairing up then. I didn't show the trial breeding on on my database, on my electronic record keeping, but both of these birds came out as 0, as you might expect. What I will do, perhaps in the next episode, we'll have a look at another pair where you can see, where I'll show you how I use that in terms of how closely they are related. But the program that I use automatically calculates the inbreeding percentage, so I can see that I'm not breeding too close or that I'm not breeding too far apart if I am breeding two of the family members together. So like I say, that's this done. Those of you that follow the Facebook page will know that I had a little bit of success at the Swindon show, which I am absolutely delighted with. First of all, a big thank you to all those who laid it on. It was very hectic at times. It was you know, where they got a new hall, it was slightly smaller, and it was still, I think, finding our way around as a club as to how best to make it work, and it did take a little bit of jiggling around. I think they nearly hit the 500 birds bent, so it was a good turnout given that we'd moved venue and date, or given that they had moved venue and date, so it was a good turnout of birds, I think. But well done to all of those for laying that on. Really enjoyable afternoon and great to catch up with some of you. And a particular mention before I talk about how I did to Carl, who came up to me. He actually came up to me and mentioned about what I had won. So because he had seen my name, he was up in the I suppose doing the background work or the back office work of, you know, checking the results, doing all that and writing out the various bits and pieces. And he came up to me and said, I see that you've done well, or did reasonably well, and he said he recognised my name from Shed Talk. So Carl, thank you very much for that. He did say that I look taller in the videos. The camera can't lie, but actually I'm not that tall. So but thank you, Carl, for coming up and having a quick word, and for everybody else who spoke to me at the show. So what happened then? So I'm pleased to say, and I've mentioned it before, I don't like showing hens really, but I was struggling with numbers for this show because a few of the cock birds that I wanted to show had gone right out of condition. They were dropping feathers all over the place. There was no point in taking them. So I pulled out the opaline cinnamon sky blue hen that was bred off of the Terry Sadler line, or the Terry Sadler outcross, you may remember. Came second in my rundown, took that along, and I'm very pleased to say it took the CC for the, let me just double check, young bird challenge certificate for the opaline cinnamon sky blue. So there we go, really pleased with that. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't the strongest section in the old schedule, but there were more than, you know, there was just a lot more than my bird in there, so, and a lot more than just the birds that I had put in. So I am very pleased that I got a CC, a challenge certificate. We all chase these, don't we? So yes, I'm pleased with that, as I say, and that bird's now back in the main flight. She won't go out again until she goes in the breeding cage, until after she's been in the breeding cages at least. So like I say, I don't really like showing the hens, but she did very well for me. So the other thing I got, so I had another, so I think that was a green dot. I also had a blue dot for one of the birds, and then I had a couple of birds placed in second and third in their class. Again, you know, I suppose the real judge for me is how I do in the intermediate rundown, and none of my birds got placed in the intermediate rundown. So whilst I am happy with this, and I shouldn't, you know, underestimate how pleased I am with that, I do know that I've still got a long way to go, and that starts with this pairing up, doesn't it? Right, well, that's the Swindon show spoken about and how I did there. I'm going to put these back in the main flight, and we will nip out and talk about fives from breeding to bench. So the title of this bit of each episode is called Fifes from Breeder to Bench. We've done all of the breeding. You've watched me succeed, I think, in the most part, on getting the young Fifes to breed, weaned and onto the perch, and we're now getting them through the molt. The final bit, of course, is the bench bit, which is getting them out at a show. And I'm pleased to say that following on from the Swindon Gold Show, that evening I had another meeting, so I went down to Swindon for the show. That evening I had another meeting at Oxford 1910, which was just a little tabletop show, so I quickly put the budgies back in the flight after their day out, grabbed 3 of the Fifes, put them in the show cages, with 3 of the Fifes that are from the early rounds, so the ones that have mostly, in the most part, are quite a long way through the molt. Put them in the show cages, took them out to Oxford 1910, so we have hit the bench bit, albeit just a little bit of fun with a little tabletop show with members just looking at them and picking the one that they liked. Did I do any good? No, not really. Did I expect to? No, not really, but there you go. At least I've got some of them on the bench, and maybe later on in the year when we get out to a few more of the Caged Bird Society shows, I'll have a better impression really of what those young Fifes are like. So that's it from the breeding from Fifes to bench. Hope you enjoyed that little clip of the birds out and being looked at. So, well, there we go, we've actually reached the bench phase of that. Now, what about these zebras and the ones that were in the nest box? Well, I'm pleased to say that literally today I've come down here this morning, and first thing this morning I noticed that at least one of the young zebras is out of the nest box and is happily flying around the flight, so is actually able to fly. Bangs into a few things occasionally when it gets flustered, but that is able to fly. It does look as if it's taken a little bit of a battering in the nest box, a little bit of feather plucking, I think. What I'll do is, if it carries on being plucked, because as you know, those of you that keep birds will know that quite often if a bird's showing signs of being plucked, the other birds will continue that process. They seem to pick on it and pick on the new feathers coming through. So if that's the case, what I will do is, once I'm happy that it's feeding itself, is I might take it out of the flight, put it in one of the smaller cages and just let it recover, grow some feathers back and then put it back in. Normally once you do that, it will get left alone. So there we go, at least we now got at least one of the zebras fledged. For me, the next bit is I'm going to give it about another 3 days, and then I'll check the nest box and see if there's any others. If they're still in there, what I might do is just pop them out if they look old enough to jump the box. If they're not, then what I will do is take all the nest boxes out, and we'll close the breeding down for the zebras from this particular year. So there you go, Rennie, got them on the perch, mate. So yeah, that's it really for the zebras. Well, a slightly longer episode than usual. Hope that was okay, and I hope you enjoyed that little look at how I start that preparation around pairing the birds up and go about looking at them. Good news out there in the Finch and Fife Flight on both accounts, both the zebras and the Fifes. But that is all we've got time for in this episode. Until the next time, do stay safe and enjoy your birds.